my channel. In this video, I am going to be showing you how to make this pair of trousers. Yes, I made it and you can make it too. This is not my design, by the way. I have already made a video on how to make the pattern, so be sure to check that video out first before watching this video. I cannot get over this pair of trousers. I will definitely be making it again. I've already seen the fabric I want to use for it. I think this time I'm going to be using a brocade fabric because I think it will just give it a little bit more structure. For this video, I used a crepe fabric which has some stretch to it, and it turned out really good. Really good. So I am super excited to see what you create. So please let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe and give this video a like. And now we can start. My name is Ijoma and welcome to my sewing diary. The materials you will need are your fabric of choice. I'm using this burnt yellow crepe fabric, if that's the color, and about 2 yards of it. You'll also need your measuring tape, completed manipulated zipped trouser pattern, pins, matching thread for sewing, contrasting thread for basting, needle, button, tailor's chalk, fabric scissors, 2 long zips and 1 short zip. I'll leave the full list in the description box below, as well as all associated lists. So go ahead and cut your fabric according to the directions on the pattern and mark notches at all seam intersections. Now I've shown you how to do this in my previous videos, so you should be a master at it by now. Let's just get straight into the pinning. We'll be sewing one side at a time so that we're not confused. So starting with the back, pin your back top pieces together at the style line, matching notches, so that you now have 2 back pieces. Also pin the bottom pieces at the knee line so that you have 4 pieces. When you're done, go ahead and sew all pinned pieces, and that is the top and bottom back, with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and press open all seams after sewing. Join the back bottom pieces at the crease line, right side to right side. Now you can use your pattern pieces to guide you. Another way to ensure you're joining the right pieces is by making sure you match the hem lines such that the hem is protruding at opposite sides. Now, to ensure that the seam line at the knee correspond, because you want a continuous seam, first pin and tack the pieces at the knee to keep it in place, and then go ahead and pin from top to bottom. At the end, you will have 2 back pieces when you're done. Stitch together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and press open after sewing. Next, join the top and bottom back pieces together by placing right side on right side, matching seam lines and notches. Again, first pin and tack the seam lines of both pieces together so that it does not move and the lines are aligned, before pinning everywhere else. Do this for both pieces and sew all pinned areas together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Press open your seam after sewing. Placing right side on right side, pin the center back together till you get to the crotch end, and stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, pressing your seam open afterwards. Set this aside when you're done, and let's get the front pattern up to speed. Join your bottom front pieces at the knee line, right side to right side, so that you have 4 pieces. As you did with the back, you can use your pattern pieces to guide you. Go ahead and sew all pinned areas with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and press open after sewing. Using your pattern pieces as a guide again, locate your crease line on the corresponding left and right pieces. Recall your front crease line has a 1 inch zipper allowance. You can also use the hem of your pieces as a guide like you did the back. Now, with right side on right side, pin the knee lines together and then pin 1/2 inch in at the top edge. You'll only be stitching the 1/2 inch length at the top edge of your crease line. Also recall that you'll be stitching with a 1 inch seam allowance. Do this on both pieces. When you're done stitching, with your tailor's chalk, mark out your 1 inch zipper allowance on the crease line like so on both sides. Fold, pin, and press down to create crisp fold lines. At the knee lines, baste down to ensure that the fabric does not move. Do this on both pieces. At the folded crease line, mark 2 inches up from the hem, and then starting from the 2 inch mark, pin your zipper from bottom to top along the crease line like so. I use the long zip, so I'll be trimming at the top. Now, if your zip is as long as mine, you do not want to trim at the bottom. If you do this, your zipper won't have a stopper and would run off. However, cutting off at the top will allow me to seal it off at the top and prevent the zip from running off. Now, you want to make sure your knee lines correspond on both sides. So when you get to your knee line on one side, mark the point on the other side of your zip and ensure the knee line on the other side is pinned to this line. Pin on both sides and do the same on the other front bottom piece. Then go ahead and loosely baste the zip down with contrasting thread from bottom to top and sew down with a 1/8 inch seam allowance close to the zipper teeth. I found out that the best way to sew it down was with the zips closed. When you're done, pin down the excess zip. Don't cut it off just yet. We want to make sure we've sealed the top properly before cutting it off. Set the front bottom pieces aside so that we can work on the front top piece. Pin the front pieces at the style line so that you now have 2 pieces. Sew the pinned areas with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and press open your seam allowance afterwards. With right side on right side, pin your pocket facing on your top front pieces. And pin the 1/2 inch seam allowance crotch line only. Stitch and press open afterwards. Then mark your 1 inch zipper allowance from the waist down to where you have stitched with your tailor's chalk. Pin and press to create crisp fold lines. And then insert your short zip 1/2 inch in from the waist. Pin, baste, and stitch as you did the others. It is at this point that I decided to run a stopper at the ends of my zips with my needle and thread. This is because the needle on my sewing machine was very fragile, being a needle I use for stretch crepe fabrics, and so I needed to hand sew the ends afterwards. You can also cut off all excess zip at this point because all ends are now sealed. Now it's time to join the back and front pieces together at the inseam and sides. So placing right side on right side, pin the inseam and sides of your front and back trouser pieces together, making sure that the knee lines are aligned and basting where all knee lines knit together. Go ahead and sew all pinned areas with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and press open when you're done. Next, finish off your hem by first marking 1/2 inch in from the edge of the hem and then a further 1 inch in from the first mark. You'll be folding the first 1/2 inch mark, pinning and pressing, and then go ahead and fold it over the second 1 inch mark, pin and press. Do this to both sides, and when you're done, stitch down the inner edge with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Set the trouser aside so that you can prepare the waistband. At the bottom of your waistband pieces, fold and press 1/2 inch in from the edge on both bands. And then placing right side on right side, pin and sew the top part of the waistband together. When you're done, press open. And then trim the seam allowance to 1/4 inch to reduce bulk. Placing right side of your waistband to right side of your front trouser, pin the seam allowance on one side of your waistband to your waist, starting 1.5 inches in from one end of the waistband and ending 1.5 inches to the other end of the waistband. Go ahead and stitch the waistband to the waist with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then at the open edge of the waistband, placing right side on right side, pin from bottom to side in an L shape so that you have your 1 inch button allowance, and sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Trim your seam allowance when you're done and turn it to the right side. At the waist, trim the seam allowance zone to 1/4 inch to reduce bulk, and then you're going to be stitching in the ditch. So with the other bottom seam allowance of the waistband at the wrong side of your trouser, pin it to the front so that it just covers the waist stitch at the back and the pin is just below the waist seam line in front. Your pin should be at the right side of your fabric. Do this round the waist and then moving very slowly with your sewing machine, or fast if you're more comfortable. Stitch the waistband to the front on the front seam line so that the stitch is within the front seam line and should also catch about 1/8 inch of the back. When you're done, press down with your iron. With your desired button, I changed mine from what I showed in my intro video. Go ahead and mark the length of your button with your Tailors chalk on one side of your button allowance. I did mine on the right hand side. And then with your button foot, sew your button hole. Now I made a right mess of my actual trouser because I was so tired. So I'll show you how to make your button hole with your button foot on a piece of fabric. So with your button foot fixed on your sewing machine and your mark made on your trouser, place the fabric underneath your button foot such that the space in the button foot is the same length as your buttonhole mark. Then starting with your sewing machine settings on point 4.2, sew a couple of times. I'm using a Toyota sewing machine, so the number of the setting is dependent on the type of machine you're using, but it should be the same stitch. Then change your settings to point 3 and stitch until you get to the end of the mark made. Then change back to point 4.2 and sew a couple of times, and finally change to point 1 and sew till you get to the first start. At the end, cut open your buttonhole made with your seam ripper or razor blade and stitch your button to the other side. Next, overlock your raw edges. As usual, I like to do mine at the end so that I don't have to shave off my seam allowance. I don't have an overlock machine, so my local Tailors trusted white thread machine has come to my rescue in true fashion. And you're done! The crepe fabric gives this pair of trousers such a beautiful feel. I will definitely be making this again in a lovely jacquard fabric I've seen at my fabric store, so look out for it in one of my next intro videos. Until next time, I leave you with 3 words of advice. Subscribe, like, and comment. Many thanks to you. Bye.